In the dead of night, news breaks of a sudden halt in the semiconductor supply chain. Major tech companies from Silicon Valley to Shenzhen are in a frenzy. Stock markets around the world tremble as investors scramble, fearing the worst. The epicenter of this shockwave is Taiwan, home to TSMC, the world's most crucial semiconductor manufacturer. The island nation, already a geopolitical flashpoint, is now the focal point of a crisis that threatens to cripple the global economy. As tensions rise, Taipei's streets fill with anxious citizens and military patrols, casting long shadows under the neon lights. The world watches, breathless, knowing that this isn't just about chips, it's about the future of global power dynamics. How did we get here, and what does it mean for the world as we know it? The immediate impact of the semiconductor disruption is felt worldwide. In the United States, President Donald Trump addresses the nation from the White House, outlining emergency measures to stabilize markets and secure alternative chip supplies. In China, President Xi Jinping convenes an urgent meeting at the Great Hall of the People, emphasizing the need for self-sufficiency in technology. Automakers halt production lines, smartphones delay launches, and consumers face shortages of electronics. The global economy, intricately linked to silicon, wobbles on a precarious edge. Panic buying ensues, reminiscent of the early days of the pandemic, but this time it's microchips, not toilet paper, that's in short supply. As countries scramble for solutions, alliances are tested, and the race for technological dominance intensifies. Tension continues to build as the reality of the chip shortage sets in. In Europe, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz speaks from the Reichstag, urging for a unified European strategy to tackle the crisis. Meanwhile, tech giants like Apple and Samsung are caught in the crossfire, struggling to meet production demands. Supply chains, already strained by the pandemic, face unprecedented pressure. As governments and corporations scramble, the semiconductor shortage puts the spotlight on Taiwan's strategic importance. Global leaders realize that Taiwan's role in the tech ecosystem is a potential Achilles heel in the face of geopolitical tensions, especially with China asserting its claims over the island. The chip war is no longer a distant threat. It's a present reality reshaping alliances and strategies. As the crisis escalates, diplomatic tensions flare. The South China Sea, a hotbed of geopolitical rivalry, sees increased naval activity. The United States, determined to protect its interests and allies, conducts freedom of navigation operations, asserting its presence. Meanwhile, China's military maneuvers near Taiwan raise alarms, prompting international calls for de-escalation. At the United Nations, Secretary General Antonio Guterres urges restraint and dialogue, but the stakes are high. The chip war has turned into a broader struggle for influence in the Indo-Pacific, with the potential to reshape the balance of power. The world holds its breath, hoping for diplomacy to prevail over conflict, yet aware that the smallest misstep could ignite a larger confrontation. Key actors in the chip war emerge, each with their own agendas. In the United States, President Donald Trump focuses on rebuilding domestic semiconductor production, viewing it as a cornerstone of national security. In China, President Xi Jinping accelerates efforts to achieve technological self-reliance, investing heavily in local chip manufacturing. Meanwhile, Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen navigates the delicate balance between economic partnerships and political pressures. South Korea, home to giants like Samsung, plays a pivotal role, balancing its strategic alliance with the U.S. and economic ties with China. The European Union, under President Ursula von der Leyen, seeks to reduce dependency on foreign semiconductors by fostering its own tech industry. Each player's decisions ripple across the global stage, shaping the future of technology and geopolitics. But something unexpected happens. As the world braces for a prolonged chip shortage, a breakthrough in quantum computing emerges from an unlikely source: a small startup in Canada. This innovation promises to revolutionize data processing, potentially reducing the reliance on traditional semiconductors. Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada, proud of his nation's unexpected leap, emphasizes the importance of supporting homegrown tech talent. The news sends ripples through the international tech community, sparking a rush of investments and interest in quantum technology. While the immediate crisis remains, this development offers a glimmer of hope, suggesting that the future of technology might not be as straightforward as once thought. Could quantum computing be the wild card that changes the game? And that was when everything changed. Despite the breakthrough in quantum computing, traditional semiconductor giants like Intel and TSMC are not ready to concede their ground. Instead of cooperating, they double down on their existing technologies, investing billions in R&D to push the limits of silicon-based chips. This move surprises many who expected a shift towards quantum solutions. Meanwhile, tensions rise as China accelerates its own semiconductor capabilities, potentially threatening Taiwan's tech dominance. In Japan, Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae emphasizes the need for technological collaboration, but with caution, as nations remain wary of exposing their vulnerabilities. The global tech landscape is now a chessboard, with each move carefully calculated. The question remains, will cooperation or competition define the future of technology? The real story, however, begins decades earlier. The semiconductor industry, once a niche market, has grown into a fundamental pillar of the global economy. From the invention of the transistor in the mid-20th century to the rise of personal computing and smartphones, semiconductors have powered technological revolutions. Initially dominated by the United States, the industry saw a shift as Asian markets, particularly Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, became key players. This evolution was driven by a combination of innovation, strategic investments, and governmental support. Yet, the industry's globalization also sowed the seeds of vulnerability, as nations became interdependent on a few key suppliers. This history of the semiconductor industry is a tale of triumph and fragility, setting the stage for today's high-stakes chip war. As the stakes rise, the question looms, why did this happen now? The answer lies in a confluence of factors. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed the fragility of global supply chains, prompting nations to reconsider their dependencies. At the same time, geopolitical tensions, particularly between the U.S. and China, have intensified, with technology at the heart of the rivalry. The push for technological sovereignty has become a national priority for many countries. Additionally, the rapid digitalization of economies has surged demand for semiconductors, stretching existing capacities. This perfect storm of events has culminated in a chip war that threatens to reshape global economic structures. The world stands at a crossroads, with decisions made today likely to define the technological landscape for decades to come. The origins of the current conflict can be traced back to the early 2000s, when the globalization of the semiconductor industry accelerated. With the U.S. and Asia leading the charge, the world saw unprecedented levels of technological advancement. However, this rapid growth also led to increased interdependence, creating vulnerabilities that were initially overlooked. Major players like TSMC and Samsung became linchpins in the global supply chain, while China began its ascent as a tech power. As the industry evolved, so did the geopolitical landscape, with technology becoming a key battleground. The seeds of today's chip war were sown in this era of rapid change, setting the stage for the complex and high-stakes situation that unfolds today. The origins of the chip war trace back to the 1970s, when the semiconductor industry began to take shape in Silicon Valley. As microprocessors became the brains behind every technological advancement, countries realized the strategic importance of semiconductors. Fast forward to the 1980s, and Japan emerged as a formidable player, capturing a significant share of the global market. This sparked the first wave of tensions as the United States initiated policies to regain its competitive edge. By the 1990s, the landscape had shifted, with South Korea and Taiwan joining the fray, establishing themselves as semiconductor powerhouses. Meanwhile, China, observing the growing importance of semiconductors, began investing heavily in its domestic capabilities in the early 2000s. This historical evolution laid the groundwork for the present-day chip war, where control over semiconductor technology equates to economic and military dominance. The stakes have never been higher, as nations vie for supremacy in a world increasingly driven by digital infrastructure. On the surface, the global semiconductor industry appears robust, with leading companies like Intel, TSMC, and Samsung driving innovation.
These giants seemingly enjoy insurmountable advantages, such as economies of scale, advanced technology, and extensive intellectual property portfolios. The market, valued at over $500 billion, is dominated by a few key players who have perfected the art of producing ever smaller, more powerful chips. This surface strength is further bolstered by the intricate global supply chains that facilitate the efficient movement of raw materials and finished products across continents. However, this apparent strength masks underlying vulnerabilities. The industry is heavily reliant on a small number of countries for critical components and raw materials, creating potential choke points. Moreover, geopolitical tensions threaten to upend these delicate supply chains, making the industry susceptible to disruption. As the chip war intensifies, these surface strengths are increasingly scrutinized for the hidden weaknesses they conceal.
Beneath the surface, the semiconductor industry is riddled with hidden flaws that threaten its stability. One of the most significant vulnerabilities is the concentration of production facilities in East Asia, particularly in Taiwan and South Korea. This geographic concentration makes the industry susceptible to natural disasters, political instability, and geopolitical conflicts. Additionally, the industry's reliance on rare earth materials, primarily sourced from China, adds another layer of risk. Any disruption in the supply of these critical materials could halt production lines worldwide. Furthermore, the immense capital investment required for research and development creates barriers to entry, stifling competition and innovation. The industry's complex and interdependent supply chain is a double-edged sword, facilitating efficiency but also increasing the risk of cascading disruptions. As the chip war heats up, these hidden flaws become more pronounced, revealing the fragility of what once seemed an unshakable industry. The early warnings of the chip war's potential impact began to surface in the late 2010s, with trade tensions between the United States and China escalating. As the two largest economies in the world clashed over tariffs and trade imbalances, semiconductors became a focal point of contention. In 2018, the U.S. imposed restrictions on Chinese tech giant Huawei, citing national security concerns. This move sent shockwaves through the global tech industry, highlighting the vulnerabilities of a supply chain heavily reliant on Chinese manufacturing. Simultaneously, China accelerated its efforts to achieve semiconductor self-sufficiency, launching initiatives like the Made in China 2025 strategy. These early warnings signaled a shift in the global semiconductor landscape, foreshadowing the intensifying chip war. The repercussions were felt worldwide, as nations began reassessing their dependencies and strategizing for a future where access to semiconductor technology could dictate economic and military power. The foreshadowing of the current chip war was evident in various geopolitical events that unfolded over the past decade. For instance, the annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014 and the subsequent Western sanctions highlighted the vulnerabilities in global supply chains. This geopolitical shift prompted nations to reconsider their dependencies on particular regions for critical resources. Similarly, the rise of populist leaders and the increasing trend of protectionism in global trade policies foreshadowed a world moving towards economic fragmentation. In the semiconductor industry, these trends manifested as nations began to prioritize technological sovereignty, aiming to reduce reliance on foreign suppliers. As countries like China and the U.S. doubled down on domestic production capabilities, the stage was set for a full-blown chip war. These events served as harbingers of the challenges that now confront the global economy, as the battle for semiconductor supremacy intensifies.
The crisis reached its peak during the COVID-19 pandemic, which exposed the fragility of global supply chains. With factories shutting down and transportation networks disrupted, the semiconductor industry faced unprecedented challenges. The demand for electronic devices soared as remote work and online education became the norm, but the supply couldn't keep up. This supply-demand imbalance led to shortages in everything from consumer electronics to automotive chips. Automakers were forced to halt production lines, highlighting the critical role semiconductors play in the modern economy. As the pandemic persisted, countries began implementing measures to safeguard their semiconductor industries. The U.S. announced plans to invest billions in domestic chip manufacturing, while China accelerated its push for self-sufficiency. This crisis acted as a catalyst, bringing the chip war to the forefront of global economic concerns and prompting a reassessment of dependencies and strategies among nations.
The breaking point of the chip war came when tensions between the U.S. and China escalated into a full-scale economic confrontation. The U.S. imposed stringent export controls on semiconductor technology, aiming to curb China's access to advanced chips. In retaliation, China restricted the export of rare earth materials, vital for chip production, to the U.S. This tit-for-tat strategy further strained global supply chains, creating a ripple effect across industries. Companies worldwide faced increased production costs and delays as they scrambled to secure alternative sources of components. The situation was exacerbated by the already strained supply chains due to the pandemic, pushing the global economy to its limits. As the stakes rose, other nations found themselves caught in the crossfire, forced to navigate the complex landscape of international trade and technology policies. The breaking point highlighted the interconnectedness of the global economy and the profound impact of the chip war.
In the face of unprecedented challenges, strategic decisions became crucial. The U.S. government, led by President Donald Trump, focused on rebuilding its semiconductor manufacturing capabilities. Billions of dollars were pledged to develop state-of-the-art fabrication plants domestically. This decision was driven by the need to secure the supply chain and reduce dependence on foreign producers. Meanwhile, China, under President Xi Jinping, accelerated its efforts to achieve semiconductor self-sufficiency, investing heavily in research and development. Europe, too, sought to bolster its position by promoting regional manufacturing and innovation hubs. Each country's strategy reflected its geopolitical priorities, balancing economic security with technological advancement. The strategic decisions taken during this period set the stage for the future of the global semiconductor industry, as nations vie for dominance in this critical sector. The outcomes of these decisions will shape the technological landscape for decades to come, influencing everything from economic growth to national security. As the chip war unfolded, countries were forced to weigh calculated risks against potential rewards. The U.S., for example, faced the challenge of balancing national security with maintaining trade relations. By restricting China's access to advanced chips, the U.S. risked alienating a major trade partner and igniting further tensions. On the other hand, China, in its pursuit of technological independence, risked isolating itself from the global semiconductor supply chain, which could hamper innovation. Countries like Germany and Japan found themselves navigating a complex diplomatic landscape, striving to maintain neutrality while protecting their own technological interests. These calculated risks were not without consequences, as the decisions made during this period had far-reaching implications for global trade, innovation, and economic growth. The chip war served as a stark reminder of the delicate balance between competition and cooperation in the global economy. The global effects of the chip war are profound and far-reaching. As nations grapple with supply chain disruptions and trade tensions, the quest for semiconductor dominance has led to increased investments in technology and research. The competition has spurred innovation, pushing companies to develop cutting-edge technologies faster than ever before. However, this race also poses significant risks, as the focus on national self-sufficiency could lead to economic fragmentation and reduced global cooperation. The chip war has highlighted the interdependence of nations in the modern economy, underscoring the need for collaborative solutions to global challenges. The stakes are high, as the outcomes will determine the future of technological advancement, economic growth, and geopolitical stability. As the world navigates this complex landscape, the lessons learned from the chip war will shape the strategies of nations for years to come, influencing everything from policy decisions to international relations. As the chip war intensifies, the global balance of power experiences seismic shifts. Nations like China and the United States, once cooperative in technological advancements, now find themselves in a fierce competition for dominance. This struggle is not just about economic superiority, but also about technological leadership. The control over semiconductor supply chains becomes a strategic asset, as these chips are the backbone of modern technology, from smartphones to military hardware. Countries that lead in this sector will exert immense influence on global affairs. This power shift is palpable, with nations scrambling to secure their interests, forming new alliances, and revising old partnerships. The geopolitical landscape is being redrawn, with the chip war as its catalyst. The economic consequences of the chip war are profound and far-reaching. As nations impose export restrictions and tariffs, the global supply chain becomes disrupted, leading to shortages and price hikes in consumer electronics. Businesses reliant on semiconductors face production halts, causing ripple effects across various industries. Economies dependent on technological exports, like South Korea and Taiwan, find themselves vulnerable to fluctuations and geopolitical tensions. The stock markets react with volatility, reflecting the uncertainty and fear gripping investors worldwide. Central banks, including the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank, scramble to stabilize markets and prevent a global recession. This economic fallout underscores the interconnectedness of modern economies and the fragile balance maintained by global trade. The chip war teaches valuable lessons about the vulnerabilities of global supply chains and the importance of technological sovereignty. Nations are reminded of the risks of over-reliance on a limited number of suppliers and the strategic need for diversification. This conflict highlights the imperative for countries to invest in domestic semiconductor industries and to foster innovation. The role of government policy becomes crucial in supporting technological advancement and ensuring national security. Additionally, collaboration between countries could provide a buffer against future disruptions, emphasizing the need for multilateral agreements and international cooperation. As the world reflects on these lessons, the path forward involves balancing national interests with global collaboration.
In crafting future strategies, nations are beginning to rethink their approach towards technological autonomy and global partnerships. The focus is shifting towards building resilient supply chains that can withstand geopolitical tensions. This includes increasing domestic production capabilities and establishing strategic reserves of critical components. Countries are also exploring regional alliances, pooling resources and knowledge to foster innovation. The European Union, for example, is prioritizing a collective approach in semiconductor research and development. Meanwhile, the United States is incentivizing companies to bring chip manufacturing back to American soil. These strategies are designed to mitigate risks and ensure a steady supply of semiconductors, reinforcing the importance of strategic foresight in a rapidly changing world.
Reflecting on the chip war, it's clear that the pursuit of technological dominance has reshaped global interactions. This conflict has exposed the vulnerabilities of an interconnected world, where the pursuit of national interests can lead to global instability. The chip war serves as a reminder of the delicate balance that powers must maintain to ensure peace and prosperity. It highlights the need for a new era of diplomacy, where collaboration and mutual benefit take precedence over competition. As nations ponder their next moves, the lessons learned from this conflict will undoubtedly guide future policy decisions, steering the world towards a more cooperative and stable technological landscape.
The chip war invites a deeper philosophical contemplation on the nature of power and technology. It challenges the traditional notions of sovereignty and raises questions about the ethical responsibilities of technological advancement. As nations vie for control, the moral implications of such pursuits become apparent. Technology, once seen as a tool for progress, now poses dilemmas about privacy, security, and autonomy. The conflict urges a reevaluation of what it means to wield power in a digitally interconnected age. It calls for a new understanding of leadership, one that prioritizes ethical considerations alongside economic and strategic interests. This philosophical reflection prompts us to consider not just where technology can take us, but also who we become along the way.
As we draw the curtain on the chip war discussion, it's crucial to recognize the transformative power of this conflict. The stakes are high, impacting not just economies, but the very fabric of international relations. The chip war has become a defining moment in the history of technology, symbolizing the intersection of innovation and geopolitics. It's a reminder of the delicate balance between competition and cooperation. As we move forward, the lessons from this conflict will shape policies and strategies, guiding nations towards a future that values both technological advancement and global harmony. The chip war, while a challenge, also presents an opportunity to rethink and reshape our world for the better.
If you found this perspective valuable, consider subscribing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. Thank you for watching.